So inside this filter, there were some sponges. And what we want to do with these sponges is we want to put them in water that we've taken out of the tank, the pond. Now, we don't have to get these sponges super clean. We just have to free up any crap that's in them so the water can pass through them. Because what ultimately happens in these sponges is good bacteria grows, and the good bacteria that grows actually keeps the fish nice and healthy. Now, this is all very good for the garden too, by the way. Lots of nutrients. Oh, look at all the fish. I get a chance to see the fish. They've decided to come out. Now, one of the things I'm always looking for with ponds, I'm always looking for herpes virus. So what herpes virus is, it's very, very common with pond fish, and it looks like a sore that's on the fish. I'm seeing no evidence of herpes virus within these fish. Now, fish with herpes virus can actually live totally healthy, happy, long lives. But the thing you must be aware of is it is actually contagious. So if things go bad, then herpes virus is just another thing that can lower the immune system of the fish. When the fish are healthy and happy, then you find that the herpes virus isn't really a big problem. But you've got to think twice about ever adding fish to fish with herpes virus, because it's an unnecessary stress that those fish didn't need to get. So right now I'm looking at some very healthy fish, and it's very important to be aware whether your fish are fat or thin. In general, I'm very happy with what I'm looking at with these fish. I'm not seeing super fat bellies, and I'm not seeing super skinny bellies. Now, we're heading into the warmer months now, so the fish being a little bit thinner is pretty normal, because you can start upping the food about now. But if you're going into the colder months, I'd rather the fish be a little bit on the fatter side, because you'll find that they don't need to be fed as much, or they often don't eat as much during winter as they do in summer. So just bear that in mind. But really, I'm looking at some very healthy, happy fish here. Every filter's going to have an O-ring, so try not to lose it. Yep. And then the O-ring just sits inside here. And it's important that the O-ring's clean, because it needs to have a seal. And if in doubt, you can wax some Vaso or some lubricant.
I've been using Vaseline.
Yeah, and that's just to help get it in and make sure it seals.
I work in the plumbing industry.
So what I'm doing now is starting a water change. So what's happening here is I'm trying to vacuum the bottom of the pond and trying to suck up any dirt that may be on the bottom of the pond. I'm just trying to get a gauge of how dirty the pond is. Because when you're changing water, what you're really wanting to be doing is taking the dirtiest water out possible and putting the cleanest water in possible to get more value out of the actual water change. What we don't want to be doing is just taking nice clean water out of the top and then just putting nice clean water back in again. We really want to be clean. We want to be removing the dirtiest water we can from the bottom and then putting nice clean water back in the top. So what this device is doing is getting into the substrate. It does seem fairly dirty, but not that bad. In a perfect world, and probably every now and then, it's worth doing a spring clean. And a spring clean would be pulling things out, vacuuming underneath them, and then putting them back in again. Right now, I'd say the urgency for a spring clean is actually quite low. So it is dirty, but it's really not that bad. The other thing we can consider too for a pond like this is some sludge remover. So there's various sludge removing products. And then instead of the normal bacteria, which breaks down the organics and releases gases and so forth, you can actually get more bacteria from mud. And then that bacteria is much more effective at actually breaking down waste in the bottom of the pond and helps to keep it clean. And I do find that all these sorts of sludge products, I get very mixed feedback. So see the water there, it's coming out now, it's very dirty, because that's what I want. I want this really dirty water coming out. So I'm digging this around in the bottom and trying to find those patches of dirt in order to get as much value out of the water change as possible. Now when you're changing the water, it's really important not to change too much water. It's much better to do a small water change regularly than do massive water changes. The massive water changes cause a lot of stress on the fish, because the fish can only handle a certain amount of change. And what can happen is if you go changing too much water, and you can shock the fish, because you can change the pH, you can change the KH, you can change the temperature, and it can all be too much for the fish. So it's better to change a little bit and then come back next week and change a little bit more than do it too much and then shock your little buddies here. Let's say a quarter is a good water change. A third is a bigger water change. A half would be a maximum. Try not to do much more than a half. Otherwise, there's more chance of you shocking a fish. I want to suggest with everything that's related to everything, little what just aquariums and ponds and stuff, is that you tend to just get what you pay for. So it's really worth doing a bit of research into the products that you use, and the difference in the experience of fish keeping when you've got a good filter that's easy to clean compared to a cheap filter that's very hard to clean. It makes a monumental difference to your experience keeping fish. The same as good quality food. When you feed good quality food, your fish are healthier, your fish are more colourful, and you get much more value out of your fish keeping just by getting things right the first time. Buying good quality equipment is really worth doing the research on. And it's funny, at the moment, there's cost of living problems in Sydney and people are looking at saving a buck. And it just seems that every time you try to save a buck, not only does it end up costing you more, but it takes away your experience and passion, because you end up not getting the same results. And if your filter's harder to clean, you're much less likely to clean it. And if your fish are not healthy and not thriving, then you're much less likely to enjoy it. And food would be a big one, because a lot of people will buy the good quality food, and then when they're buying the good quality food, they'll find their experience keeping fish is actually really wonderful. The fish are really colourful, and they're easy to keep, and their ponds staying cleaner, and then suddenly they go to a cheap food, and then they find the fish are not as hardy or tough, and they find that that the pond gets much dirtier, and their experience keeping is actually reduced to the point that some people end up even just getting rid of it. Whereas if they just stayed with good quality food and stayed with good quality equipment in the first place, it really makes a big difference to how they experience the hobby. You really want to make it easy for yourself. At the moment, we're run off one pump, and we've got water returning here. Now, the main thing that I want out of the water returning from the filter is surface agitation. So if the water can break the surface, then I'm happy, and the rippling, I'm happy. But I don't really want to wreck the visible space. So I'd want to angle it like that. I'd want to get ripples. And then the thing that I really, really want is kinetic energy. Now, the way that I get kinetic energy is if we angled the pump that way, and then let's say we got a second pump, for example, and put it down here and angled it that way, then what I'd like to see is kinetic energy. So kinetic energy is where you use the movement of the water to create the movement of the water. So right now, we're now angled the water that way, but there's not a whole heap of power. Now, mind you, we don't need a whole heap of power through this filter. So that's probably a good amount of flow through the filter, because if you put the water through the filter too fast, then you're going to decrease the contact time, and you can potentially decrease the efficiency of the filter. So this pump on this filter is actually good. Now, mind you, having backup or contingency is also a really great idea. So if we had a second pump in here, preferably a dirty run pump, just pump that way, and we were able, because this pond actually goes right past there. So if we could actually get some kinetic energy going in here, then we're going to use the movement of the water to create the movement of the water. That means we're going to have better gas exchange, better dissolved oxygen levels, and it also means the fish get to work. And what I mean by that is if your water's pretty still and the fish swim, then the fish swim through the water. On the other hand, when there's a bit of kinetic energy, the fish can actually swim against the water. Therefore, the fish get much more resistance and the fish get a lot more of a workout. It's very good for the fish, and it's very good for increasing dissolved oxygen level and redox potential. Now, what redox potential is that the redox potential is your reduction rate. So in the water, we have ammonia, which is first degree fish waste. Then bacteria needs to grow in the filter to break the ammonia into nitrite. Then bacteria needs to grow in the filter to break the nitrite into nitrate. Then if your nitrate comes up, that means we need more water changes. So at the moment, none of these levels are overly high, but over time we do need to monitor them, and we do need to be doing semi-regular water changes. So we've got a water change underway now, but in regards to contingency and in regards to just generally keeping the environment healthier and better, it would not hurt to have an extra pump. You do not have to, but it wouldn't hurt at all. And then that does mean that you've got backup, and that does mean that that your water's going to be much cleaner and your water's going to flow a whole lot better. And back to the redox. So the redox can be measured in millivolts, and it's how fast can the bacteria work. So if we don't have a lot of oxygen, then actually our redox is very slow, which means the breakdown of ammonia to nitrite to nitrate occurs very slowly. And that means you need a lot more bacteria. And then if you have a lot more bacteria, that's going to use up a lot more oxygen. And then that becomes a death spiral. So on the other hand, if we have good water flow and our oxygen stays up, the oxygen helps to keep the redox up. And if the redox is up, that means your bacteria works a lot more efficiently. And if the bacteria works a lot more efficiently, that means we need a lot less bacteria. And if there's a lot less bacteria, that means that that our oxygen level will stay up and our CO2 level will stay down. Now, also, whether the pond goes green is a battle between bacteria, because the good bacteria is invisible, it's healthy, and it keeps the water nice and clean for the fish, versus algae. Because algae also loves to feed on these same nutrients that the bacteria feeds on. And if the environment isn't right for the good bacteria, and then it is right for the algae, you'll find that everything will keep going green. So if everything's going green, what we need to look at the setup, and we need to look at why is this setup favoring the algae, and why isn't it favoring the good bacteria? Because it's the good bacteria that we want to create a nice, healthy, clean-looking environment. It's algae versus good bacteria. Algal growth is very, very normal. And there is algae that grows on a hard surface, or there's algae that grows in the water. So the waterborne bacteria is the most annoying, because that just makes everything green. If your waterborne bacteria is going crazy, we need to make sure you've got good flow, make sure you've got good oxygen and good gas exchange, make sure that our filter has lots of good bacteria in it, and make sure that the UV in the filter has been replaced. The other thing too is we need to, if we're ever damaging our bacteria in our filter, we've got to not have the UV on all the time. So it never hurts every now and then just to turn the UV off for a day, once a week or something, just to help good bacteria get into the filter. Because there has been situations where people have got the UV on from the very start and they never really establish good bacteria in the filter. So having the UV off every now and then isn't really a bad thing for just helping to get good bacteria into your filter. Once again, looking at the shape of these fish, overall I'm really happy with them. If this was going into winter, I'd want them a little bit fatter than this. But it's really important to keep an eye on your fish, and over time, if they're getting thin, then whatever you're doing, you need to do more. If they're getting fat, whatever you're doing, you need to do less. So what I'll normally do with a food like Danichi is I will usually feed them what they eat in about 30 seconds. And so I think all the food's gone after 30 seconds. And in summer, I'll probably do that about 3 times a week. In winter, I'll do it barely once a week. So you feed a lot less in winter to what you feed in summer. But that's only a guide, and really it's the belly of the fish that's making a difference. So right now, looking at these fish now, they look very good, but on the thinner side. And over time, you need to be watching it and adjusting what you're doing.